Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The only president to never pass 50% in approval ratings. Quote, I am not sure I have to do that. That's President Trump when being asked if he needs to appeal to the middle ground. In the 2016 election, President Trump lost by nearly 3 million votes in the popular vote, yet still won the presidency thanks to the Electoral College, which he won by 74. Now we're looking to 2020, the first episode that we're going to spend not really talking about 2020, but talking about an issue surrounding 2020, which is an independent analysis has demonstrated that Trump could lose the popular vote by 5 million and still win the presidency. Why do you care? Well, I would hope you care because, president of the country, how they're elected. This is almost certainly something that at the very least impacts our safety as a nation based on what type of position your president has. And of course, on the other side of at most, it affects everything that you do in day-to-day life. The person that you choose to lead the country. Depends on your perspective, I suppose, and how involved you are in this stuff. But we're going to get a couple different opinions on this today. And of course, no program would be complete without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
So we don't like the Electoral College? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say that.
All right.
I just gave you the facts, Lance.
Yeah.
Not my fault if you don't like what they say.
I'm perfectly fine with what they say. Do we have the fact on how many of those 5 million votes come from New York and California?
Oh, is that what you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like that fact.
Okay. Well, since it's a hypothetical scenario, none of them come from anywhere.
So what was the difference? Oh, okay. So we're going to do hypothetics today.
Well, I'm just telling you what.
What was the difference last time in 2016?
3 million. Approximately.
Well, I mean, in California and New York.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, well, I don't have that offhand, but maybe our producer could work on that for us. So what I want to start off with is
I know that Trump won 3 states by 77,000 votes and that put him over the top. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I mean, that part was in the article.
Yes.
But of the 5 million, how many of them came from just a couple of states that, so.
Well, sure.
Is it
3 million is almost nothing?
There's a reason
for my places.
Okay, but there's a reason for my asking, and I'll bring it up here in a little bit.
So before I'm going to have Lance provide some historical context on the Electoral College, but before we do that, we're going to test our National Honor Society member, our producer, here, and see as generally regarded as a supporter of President Trump. I want you to just set politics aside for a moment, and I want to ask you as you, Caleb Spinner, okay? If I told you that 5 million more people voted for someone than somebody else, do you think that person should win? The person with the most votes should win.
Yes.
That's what you think.
That's how it's been ever since.
So, but just to be clear, you're accepting that implication. If we were to follow that scenario to its conclusion, that means that right now, instead of Donald Trump, you would have President Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
You understand that?
Yeah. But it was like Lance said, though, that we play by the rules of the game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Democrats, they lost because they underestimated or overestimated, I guess, their support in certain areas. And they shouldn't have done that because that's how you lose the game. Underestimate your opponent or overestimate your strength. And those are some of the biggest contributors. Right, Lance?
That is correct.
Sports guy.
What is it? Don't count your chickens before they hatch.
There you go. Right? That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's apropos.
Apropos.
There you go.
Excellent. So, Lance, give us the historical background before we dive into what might be wrong with Caleb's thinking.
The historical background of the Electoral College?
Yeah. Yeah. Why did the founders believe this was something that we needed? Lots of people are confused by this, right? I mean, basically, it doesn't make a lot of sense to them.
Well, they were looking for some kind of unity to stand up to England, and they wanted to get as many colonies on board as possible. And so they brought them to a big meeting, and they said, well, we're going to have one state, one colony, one state, one vote. And we did that. It's called the Articles of Confederation. And basically under the Articles of Confederation, things weren't going real well. States were saying, no, we have the right to refuse to give the federal government money. We have the right as a state to not give soldiers and arms to the federal government. We're going to keep our money and our supplies and our soldiers here to protect our own individual state. And so the founding fathers said, we need to get a better system than the Articles of Confederation. And so they called for a meeting and nobody showed up. And then some stuff happened and they called for another meeting and 12 of the 13 states showed up and they came up with the Constitution. Now, we did eventually defeat England under the Articles of Confederation. That is true before my historical people come in and start bashing on me. Yes, we did win the war without it, but we found out that it was just very difficult under the Articles of Confederation to run the country the way we wanted to. So the founding fathers, after Shays' Rebellion, got together and said, we need to come up with a better way of giving everybody an equal voice. And they had two plans, the large state plan and the small state plan, named after politicians or founding fathers. But that's the way most of us learn it in school. And then they came up with a compromise. Oh my gosh.
They did what? Wait.
Something that Justin loves, a compromise.
What?
Is Lance speaking in a different language?
And it was known as the Great Compromise, whereas they said we will give the large states more power in a body of government called the House of Representatives, and we will give the smaller states equal voice in a second government body known as the Senate. And those two groups will come together and determine a state's vote in the electoral college, which will be how we elect the president, so that we do not, our supreme leader, so that we don't have one state really controlling things or whatever. We don't get into one state, one vote and all the disassociation that occurred with that. And this way it's kind of fair because we split the power up and we'll give one group, the power to do money issues. We'll give another group the power to say, sign and negotiate and ratify treaties. And so we're splitting the power equally. And as a part of this, we want to make sure that we elect our leader. And well, we don't really want the rabble rousers out there to have power to elect the leaders. So we're going to create this electoral college and not base it on the popular vote because that could get us in trouble. And so they created a thing called the Electoral College, which is the number of votes based on the number of people you have in the House of Representatives and your two senators.
Okay.
And you have to get one more than 50% of that to become president. So in the CNN episode that we're using as the basis to start this conversation, they show that Donald Trump would win by one vote. He would win 270 to 268 in the Electoral College because there are 538, because there are 435 members in the House of Representatives, 100 senators, plus 3 Electoral College votes given to the District of Columbia, which is the minimum a state can have. The minimum is 1 member in the House of Representatives and 2 senators, hence 3. So 538 divided by 2 is 269. You have to win a simple majority. Simple majority is 1 more than half. So 269 plus 1 equals 270.
Math lesson today too, Lance.
Used to do it on the board 6 times a day for 30 some years. So there you go.
So is it
how much history you want?
Well,
is our time up now?
Well, yeah, that's a lot. That's a good bit of history. The one question that comes to mind is, do you think the founding fathers trusted the everyman to choose?
No, they didn't give every
leaders?
man the right to vote.
Oh, okay.
You had to be a white male landowner over the age of 21.
Oh,
that's the people that they thought could
they
vote.
didn't think that everybody should vote.
Women couldn't vote. Minorities couldn't vote. Right.
Oh.
You had to be a citizen over the age of 21, male, white, and a landowner.
Uh-huh.
So no, they didn't trust everybody.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
Well, they just fought a revolution where at least 20 to 25% of the people remained loyal to the king during the war. And While many of them left, there were some of them here.
Oh, so you didn't want to trust them.
Right. And I think they gave some credence to, they thought that they were better than everybody else because they could be educated, or they were educated. And also they could be educated because in many places, education was not formal education was not available in the new United States. And so they had a higher opinion of themselves than they did of other people, even though they knew enough to know they needed the support of the common person.
Right. So with that, you're supportive of keeping things the way they are in terms of the Electoral College.
Yes.
Okay. But there are a lot of people.
I'm not in favor of getting rid of the Electoral College just because we elected somebody that people don't like, because that's happened in our history before. This isn't the first time. I know people can't think back further than they've been alive. Many people not even further back than last week. Me, sometimes I'm that way. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, or if I even had lunch.
Now, there's a lot of Democratic candidates right now, though, that are suggesting that they would get rid of the Electoral College. We're going to talk about why Lance is in a different place than them.
They can't.
Or why they would like for it to be gone.
They're the president. They can't do
put
that.
it that way.
Okay.
Right. Not yet.
As president, they can't do that.
No, I know. I'm saying we haven't yet given that power to the president.
That's true.
But if the legislative branch continues its spineless nature, it might not be long before our president can just unilaterally change the Constitution.
That's a possibility. That's true.
Like Russia, right? I mean, we could just be them. Wouldn't that be fun? So we'll talk about in a moment here why you might not want to change it and why you might, and why hopefully give you an appreciation for this quandary that our founding fathers were in with this whole notion of trying to balance the rights of the majority and the rights of the minority, right? How do you do that? Is it even possible? Well, let's find out. But before we do, we've got something super important to talk about.
Uh-oh.
And that is the debate of the day, Lance. We're going to talk that in just a minute. But why are we here, Lance? What are we trying to do today?
It's for me to teach my history class again. Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I mean, overall as TrueChat?
Yeah.
Oh, well, TrueChat's here to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
That sounds more like it.
Okay.
I mean, I think you try to teach some history a little bit every day, right? To somebody. Taught some to
if they'll listen,
to your family over the weekend.
Well, I didn't teach it to them. They knew it.
Okay.
We just discussed it. Yes.
Okay. So the debate of the day, fish or steak? You may only keep one for the rest of eternity. Fish or steak, Lance?
Well, I love red meat, but I'm not a steak eater. So I eat fish.
So what if we change it to beef or fish? We'll let Lance think about this.
I've always grown up in the Midwest. When I go to the coast, I love fish, and I choose to eat fish on many occasions. It's just that beef is more readily available and is cheaper.
Right. Well, the quality of beef relative to its price is better here than fish is.
Yes.
Because it's not that you can't get good seafood, but you pay a fortune for it.
Right. But if I was going to, it would be fish. I would much, and part of it is my age. I know that it's healthier for me.
Yeah.
I mean, the good stuff, the good fish is healthier for me than the good red meat, but I've grown up on red meat and beef, but it's not necessarily my favorite.
So beef or fish? Caleb?
Oh, I've got to go steak. I love the red meat. The healthy part of me wants to say fish.
How much?
But steak is where
what
you gotta go.
Types of fish have you eaten? Have you eaten a lot of fish?
I have had cod, tilapia.
No, okay.
That's basically it, actually. But we caught some out in Florida.
Oh.
They were, I forget what kind they were.
Okay.
Snapper, I think, is what it was. But we filleted those, and
so we have
good.
A producer in training today too, who's in the booth with Caleb. I think we'll give him his first ever, I believe, on-air appearance, unless he's been hiding something from us that we're not aware of. So Bradley, if you would be so kind. What do you think? Beef or fish?
Well, I've always loved red meat, but just for health benefits, I would have to go with fish. Because if I was forced to eat red meat my whole life, I would be scared to see how I would turn out.
Look at that. You couldn't see it, but Lance leaned back and gave himself a good pat. So,
yep, that's what you look like. Be careful. See, it's like when I go out to eat, I always look and see if they have salmon, and I look at the price,
salmon,
and then I get beef or chicken.
Yep.
But if money wasn't an issue, I would eat salmon all the time and everything. I love salmon.
Salmon is excellent.
I love salmon.
Good salmon.
But living here, I make the choice to eat something cheaper.
Right. Yeah, I would probably go, again, if it was, forever, I guess I would go with, I also assume that if we just had to have one of these forever, the price would probably drop since, there would be more demand for it. So maybe there's some hope there in this hypothetical scenario, but I guess I would go the fish route too. I raised cattle for anybody who doesn't aware. So I just want to be clear that
that's different.
Yeah.
Not where I thought you would go.
Well,
even though you're a health nut.
Yeah. I love beef a lot. I do. But to me, beef is just a single category, where fish is a very broad. There's so many different types of fish. There's all manner of different flavors, especially if we're lumping in shellfish. Then you're getting into one of my favorite areas. Okay. So if I had to choose one, I'd choose it because, much like Bradley said, it is healthier. On the average, there is some seafood that you could probably eat and some beef that you could probably eat where you'd flip that, but you'd be hard pressed to find that very often. So I think we got quite a few. Caleb's sticking true. So let us know your thoughts at TrueChat, ORG, TrueChat.org on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media. And before we continue, we're going to have to take a brief break to hear from one of our sponsors. Welcome back. The only president to never pass 50% approval rating. Do you need to be popular to be president? Well, no, obviously. But should you be popular to be president? And that's, I think, what this question of the Electoral College boils down to. What our greater debate here is it necessary, right, for most people to want you to be president? Is that the type of person we want to be president? Now, I think that most people, Lance, most everyday Americans are just like Caleb Spinner, except probably not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white male. National Honor Society. They probably don't meet that demographic requirement, but they're just like Caleb in that they don't want a candidate to win who doesn't get a majority of the vote. I'll tell you where I'm at on this because I have struggled with it. And I think those that know me understand that I struggle with things like this. And when I say it, I mean that I've gone back and forth on it at different times in my life because I'm not satisfied with either answer. The two answers being put forward right now are get rid of it, right? Or keep it. And I don't like either of those answers very well. I tend to lean toward the get rid of it, but I also have read enough history and learned enough from people like Lance to know that when you just give the majority the right to do whatever they want, that can lead to very oppressive behavior, and what I think is morally unjust behavior of the minority. And that's not okay with me either. So I appreciate the side of you don't want to just throw out the minority just because you don't like what they have to say right now. Because someday, chances are, at some point in some category, you will be the minority. And when that happens, you won't want people to just be able to toss you aside and do whatever they want. The majority still typically rules in this country on a lot of things, a lot of the time. But I think our founding fathers, as Lance highlighted, tried to create a system, the key word being try, because I think if you could talk to a few of them, they'd probably be some of the first people to tell you that they did not develop the perfect system, because there isn't a perfect system.
Right.
But they did their best to do two things, right? Create a balanced system and create a system that people could agree on. Because as Lance highlighted, there's a pressure that we often forget at the time, which is, there was a lot of internal fighting still going on that had to be addressed. It wasn't as simple as just saying, well, this is what it should be, so that's what we're going to do. There was a lot of small states, population-wise at the time, that said no, or colonies, rather, who said, if we do this, we will lose all of our say, and we're not okay with that. Hence the compromise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to where we are today in 2019, looking to the 2020 election. I'm not sure that voters on the average are better informed today than they were then, Lance. I'm not sure if there's a way to quantify that into factual data, but I don't get the feeling that they are. I don't think the amount that we care has necessarily changed. I think that most people want to care. Okay. Notice the phraseology of the words there. I think that most people, right? If I ask Caleb and I ask Bradley, do they want to care about politics? The answer is probably yes, right? They probably want to care about who our president is. Right. Do they care? That's a different question. Much like I want to care about sports, I would like to care about professional sports, but I don't. Well, okay. To say I don't completely care is not true, but I don't in the way that Lance or Caleb does.
That's true.
I don't care to that extent. So I guess the point that I'm getting at here with all this is I appreciate the difficulty of the position they were in. Because on the one hand, you want people to feel like what they vote counts. And when you have the Electoral College stray from what the popular vote did, I think it leads to people feeling like what they said didn't matter, which isn't true, right? It's not that it didn't matter, but it feels like it didn't matter enough. At the same time, you also don't want to squash or put somebody into power who shouldn't be there, because we know, history has taught us, that some of the most popular individuals have also been some of the worst for different nations. Not always. I mean, there have been popular people who were also very good for the country, for a country, right? But there have also been very, very popular people who were really, really bad for the human race. Hitler coming to mind as an example, right? So what do you think, Lance? I mean, I'm in this conundrum. Is there a compromise? Is there a middle ground between just get rid of it? Is there an improve it scenario where we maybe do something that makes it better without just totally throwing it aside? Something that helps people feel more comfortable with having this thing in place.
Get rid of the two-party system.
I like that one.
Because if you have 3 or more candidates, but here's the problem, okay? You'd have to also change this part. If we can't come to a conclusion in the Electoral College, which has happened in the past when we didn't have just a two-party system and we had multiple strong candidates.
Wait, you mean president. It hasn't always been Democrat and Republican, Lance? Is that what you're telling me?
That's what I'm telling you.
Well, I don't know. Do our two, do they know that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
We both know because we were NHS,
okay.
But
and they're high school juniors, which means in the state of Ohio they should have
recently learned that.
They should have been taught
seniors
this by the time they were juniors.
Yeah.
There were
we were.
Times when, and our founding fathers accounted for that, and they said when that happens, then the vote goes to the House of Representatives, which has happened.
So then they default to
our history.
But let's explain that, because it's not exactly what you'd think in the House of Representatives.
Right.
Not each one gets a vote.
Then it becomes one state, one vote.
Right.
So who has the majority, you would think, in today's political climate in the state? If your state is made up mostly of Democrats, probably they vote for the Democrat. But that wasn't the case, because there necessarily just weren't two political parties being represented. There were 4, and it was more regional. So if you get rid of the Electoral College, here's your problem again. You get regional candidates because people don't feel like they're being represented. So I get people from a person from my region. And so then we don't get a true plurality. We don't get somebody who's running for the good of the country. We get somebody who's running for the good of the South or the West or the Northeast or the farmers or big business So do we trade a plurality? But I mean, that's the only thing that I can, really come up with, which is why I don't disagree with any of the arguments and the few flaws that are in the system, but I still think it's better than anything we can come up with, because whatever we come up with will have what I believe are greater flaws than what we currently have. But there are things that you can try and do and see if they work better. But then, as you pointed out, a lot of the things that we have now that we think are improvements in our country, we had because we didn't let the majority keep their idea. Right. We got rid of slavery. We've opened up, rights for all people. We, tried to, what I'm saying? We've given women the right to vote. We've given 18-year-olds the right to vote. Not that we haven't experimented and done some things wrong. We thought prohibition, but I'm all for trying something, but many, many times this system has allowed us to give more rights to the common man. And I'm very leery on giving up a system that has done that. Over time, we've come up with what most of us, I think, would agree are better decisions. Not everybody, because there are people that don't want to give equality to certain groups of people. We know that, but we also allow for those people to still be a part of our country, which is what makes us so good. Because if you were in Rohingya or Myanmar, if you didn't agree with the popularly elected leader, you've had genocide committed against you. So is that what we want? And I'm not trying to be big time, but that's what we're talking about. We allow, like Caleb and I were talking off air before the show, and I was pointing out, we're so similar that there are just a few things that make us different. So do you want, and we allow for all of that to be here. And there are very few places in the world where we allow for people with differences of opinion to exist in the same place far more peacefully than they do in the rest of the world. I'm not saying we don't have our problems and we don't have our violence and we don't have people acting out against other groups of people. We do, but it's not, as far as I'm concerned, and this is the discussion for another day, this is the least violent place for people of differing opinions than almost any other place in the world. And I don't want to change anything about that. That's what makes me proud to be American, is that we can all live here and disagree. And for the most part, not commit violent acts against one another due to those differences.
You know why I do the debate of the day, Lance? Maybe.
Do I? No, I have no clue. I'm just sitting here and I know you come up with stuff. So I do not know why.
I'll tell the audience. We'll give away the secrets. There's two reasons. The one is probably the obvious one, because it's fun.
Okay.
It can be, right? I mean, I think we've had ones that are more fun than others. And the second one is the more interesting one, at least for me, as most things are that are less obvious, I think, that I make choices about, is it shows the simplicity of, I think, too often what we boil issues down to, right? Which is this either or decision. Mm-hmm. And most of us, I think, on most of the debate of the day questions, right? Most of us, most of the time on most debate of the day questions, don't want to choose. We do because those are the rules of the game, right? We choose one because those are the rules of the game. And we're told that we only get to keep one. But the great thing is, Lance, we live in a country where that's not the case, right?
Right.
On pretty much every debate of the day, we don't have to do that. Lance likes waffles and pancakes. He would only keep waffles if he had to, right? But he would prefer not to get rid of pancakes. I like Coke and Pepsi. I would choose Coke if I only had to keep one, but there's some Pepsi products out there that I really would like to keep because I like them better than some Coke products. The point in all this is I like the idea you brought up about maybe you don't have to change the Electoral College. We always try to broaden to the larger issue, right? Maybe it's the two-party system that's the issue. When faced with, do we trade plurality for singularity? I think more often than not, I would probably take that. Are there some regional things that come into play that might be of concern then? Yes. But I think that we were a nation with more views that were widely accepted when we had more parties. It was easier for us to support someone that we didn't agree with everything on. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have to pretend like we agreed on everything. And that's the thing that irks me about the two-party system. There are socialists and nationalists that are taking over the Democratic and Republican parties today. And I'm sorry, but they're not Democrats and they're not Republicans, and they don't belong inside those parties. They have the right to have a voice, and they should have a voice, but they should have their own voice outside of those parties, not inside of them, causing massive disruption in the party, because that's not what the parties are for. They're supposed to be a place for people who agree on 90% of things to come together and use power that is in numbers. But that's not happening because they've just decided that we only have two parties. So rather than Bernie Sanders running as a socialist, which is what he should be doing, he's running as a democratic socialist, which is a nice way of saying, I'm running as a Democrat. I'm actually a socialist, but I can't win as a socialist, so I'm running as a Democrat. And that's the same thing that happens on the other side of the aisle, too. So that's where I'm at, Lance. I like that you brought that forward because I think there's a way that helps fix this that will fix a lot of other things, too. How do we do away with the two-party system?
Glad I could be of service to you.
Yeah.
But here's the problem with that, just very quickly. When you have these governments who do that stuff, they have multiple parties, like Germany, then you have to come up with a coalition government.
Right.
And then you don't necessarily get things accomplished. And boy, do we have an issue with that right now. Mm-hmm. Do we want to make that even worse? But just to throw that out there for people to think about as they're listening to us and driving home, or when the next time they see a group of people that they like to have these kind of discussions with, do we want to go to that kind of system?
Definitely another program to be had there on the implications of going back to a multi-party system, and how exactly would we do that? But that's for another day. Lance, we've challenged people to bring additional listeners to us this year, right? Invite someone to listen. Mm-hmm. How do people tell others to listen?
Well, you can get that on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that fine podcasts are found.
For The State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
I'm Caleb Spinner.
I'm Bradley Butch.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.